What's doing, everybody? Welcome to First Class Fatherhood. I'm Alec, and before I hit you with today's interview, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the link in the description so you can listen to all of the interviews I've done with so many tremendous dads, including Dana White, Deion Sanders, Tony Hawk, and so many others. Now let's get going with today's interview. Joining me now, First Class Father, Audie Attar. Welcome to First Class Fatherhood.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
All right, let's start it like this. How many kids do you have and how old are they?
I have two kids. I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, although they're both, their birthdays are coming up in June and they're turning 8 and 5 respectively. But I have two beautiful little girls. My oldest is Ava. My youngest is Layla.
Very cool. Are you going for the boy or that ship sailed?
You know what's funny is I was one of those guys when I first got married. I was like, I'm having only boys. And, God has other plans for me, right? And so after my first one, I was like, all right, I'll go for another boy. And then I had my second one. And honestly, they've just changed my entire world for the better, right? And I was, such a meathead and, a very narrow-minded individual at one point or another early in my life. And I think as you go through experiences, you grow, right? These two little angels have done just that for me. They've expanded my mind. They've softened my rough edges. They've really given me perspective and patience and to be a little bit more thoughtful in everything I do. So it's really been a blessing for me. And while I actually would love 4 kids, just doesn't matter whether it's a boy or girl. We're kind of on the fence on that last one. I'm turning 40 in September. And my wife and I are now in our 40s, so it's the question is, do we want to go back to the trenches? But because we're enjoying life with our two little girls now, we're spending a lot of time when we go on trips. It's a lot of fun between the 4 of us. So while I would love a bigger family, we're still kind of 50-50 on if we roll the dice on a third or not.
Yeah, I hear you right there. I'll be 40 in October myself, Audie, and we have the 4 kids. We had 3 boys, then we got the girl on the last try. So if we didn't get her on the last try, we would most likely have 5 by now. But we got her, and that's the name of that too.
Now, coming from you, because I talked to a lot of my buddies who have, either all girls or all boys, and some of them have a mix of the two, right? But I will tell you, my friends that have both always tell me, man, I love my daughters, but my son is crazy. The energy is just night and day between the two, whereas their girls are just they're thoughtful, that they really think through things, and they're very they have a level of self-awareness and emotional intelligence that their boys don't have. So what's your experience like?
It has completely changed the dynamic of the household here. I mean, yes, and we have the 3 boys, and that was an experience in itself, and having that high energy all the time. And she has brought just a tremendous amount of change to the house and the way we do things and everybody's reaction to things. And it's a complete difference. And I'm very blessed to have it. We're very grateful to have the experience of having a girl. She's only 5 years old yet. So we got a long way to go. I'm sure there's many of these changes and challenges to come, along the way. But for the moment, it's been a wonderful addition to our family, and it really has mellowed me out. Changed the dynamic of my boys' behavior in the house. It's kind of made them be a little bit more calmer when they need to, and it's giving them the opportunity to see what it's like, to treat a little girl. And so hopefully that'll play into later in the game, much later in the game when they start dating girls and stuff like that. And hopefully my daughter can learn how to be treated by boys, by men, from the way that her brothers do. So I'm hoping that all plays out.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's good to hear.
Do you have the girls involved in any sports or activities yet?
I do. My oldest is involved with soccer, tennis, golf, and she did a little jiu-jitsu, trying to get her back to do some more jiu-jitsu for self-defense classes, and I think it's a great martial art. My youngest, right now, she's just starting to get into different activities, but she's more of my diva. So she loves dance, and she loves, I think like jazz dance. She loves hip-hop dance, and she just recently asked if she could start playing soccer because she sees her big sister playing, which is great because they're both, I think, athletic, and they have a lot of energy, and And I try to make sure I encourage them to not only participate in sports, but in anything that they feel they want to do, from art, to dance, to just to make sure that they experience life and all that it has to offer, and kind of develops them in different ways.
Yeah, very cool. Audie, if you could just take a minute here to hit my listeners with a little bit about your background and what you do.
Yeah, sure. I'm the founder and CEO of Paradigm Sports Management. We are the premier mixed martial arts and combat sports agency, representing some of the biggest fighters in the world, including Conor McGregor, Michael Bisping, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Manny Pacquiao. So we're fortunate enough to be able to work with some of the best and the brightest in the sport. I myself was, grew up in Southern California. I actually was born in Baghdad, Iraq, and my parents immigrated here and gave us the opportunity to get the best schooling, the best experience in life had to offer. And I was very fortunate to become a high school All-American football player, got a scholarship in college football at UCLA. I also played one season at Idaho State. So I've been blessed to live a full life and got to experience some amazing things. And all credit to my family and my parents who sacrificed everything for us.
Wow, yeah, what an awesome American story here, Audie. That's awesome to hear. And so then, fast forwarding it, how old were you then when you first became a dad? And I know you touched on it earlier, but then how did becoming a dad change your perspective on everything?
Yeah, I mean, look, when I first became a dad at 31, and like I said, I thought I was a man at that point in time, but you are hit with this overwhelming joy and love and responsibility, there's no safety net. I played safety as a defensive back in football, so you're the last line of defense, but that has nothing to do with and no comparison to being the last line of defense for your family. And so with that great responsibility, though, comes great joy. Although the challenges are great, although sometimes, particularly early on when you have a kid, the sleepless night. I remember when my oldest, when we first had her, during the sleepless nights, I would, a lot of times people don't know how to react, right? Because the baby's crying and that's their way of communicating. And I remember I would always just talk to her, like, I know you're telling me you're hungry, and I would just kind of have some humor and some fun with it as I'm going through that experience. And I really realized at that point in time that nothing great's easy. And it all kind of came together at that point in my life. And I really, really enjoy every part of this journey. And I know that the journey has a lot more to go, because to your point, there's so many different phases in parenting and not only in their childhood, but in parenthood, right? And so I look forward to those challenges. And I'm sorry, my phone's kind of going wacko right now because there's all these messages coming in, but I look forward to those challenges. I look forward to those the different phases of this journey, and I'm sure not all of them are going to be fun, but nonetheless, I think I'm going to embrace them. And I think if I continue to do that, and we all continue to do that, we'll be all right.
Yeah, well said, Audie. And I bring a lot of Navy SEALs on the podcast here, and one of their big mottos is you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think becoming a father really puts us in all these uncomfortable situations. And I think at the onset of that, some guys may run away from that, but I think if you run into it and you embrace it, boy, it really does provide so much fruit for you and so much awesomeness that you never really imagined in your life before. So I agree with what you said there.
Absolutely. Amen to that. Amen to that.
And, obviously you've had a very successful career here as an entrepreneur, starting your own business. A lot of dads, especially ones that email me and hit me up when I have entrepreneurs on the show, they will say that they're stuck in a job that they really don't like, and they would love to try to transition into something that they really enjoy and build their own business. What kind of advice do you have for the dad out there who's maybe stuck in that job that he hates and would love to start his own business and become an entrepreneur himself?
Well, I would start with what you just ended with, which is you have to learn how to be comfortable in every uncomfortable situation you're put in. And you have to understand that, nothing great happens overnight, and it takes time. And so follow your passion, follow your dreams, but make sure you do enough research, you prepare, and you don't just jump into something blindly, right? Because at the end of the day, even if you follow your dreams, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be, sleepless nights. It's going to be sometimes where you have to figure out, okay, well, I need to buy diapers, or I gotta put food on the table. And sometimes as an entrepreneur, you're not taking any income. It's not a job. You're cutting everybody's checks. You're the last person to write yourself a check, right? So ultimately, I think you have to be ready to be uncomfortable like that. But more importantly, I think you have to plan accordingly. And I think that plan should not only prepare yourself for very turbulent times and challenging times, but more importantly, make sure you understand when it's time to pivot and go either in a different direction with that endeavor or in your own personal career, right? So, but I encourage everybody to follow their dreams. At the end of the day, we live in the greatest country in the world. We have the ability to do anything we want, so long as you get up off your butt and do it.
Yeah, yeah, good stuff. Right on with that. And you deal with so many top level fighters with being a manager, agent, with what you do. And I've had Dana White on the show here, who obviously deals with a lot of these fighters as well. And I asked him this, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. Do you see like a noticeable change in the fighters once they become dads? Is there a noticeable difference in these guys? Because I know in order to do what they do to get into a cage, you got to have like a certain mindset. Do you see like a shift in them fighters once they become fathers?
I absolutely do. I don't necessarily see it in terms of their performance, although I see the performance get better once it clicks and they become more disciplined, right? And so ultimately, a lot of these athletes are still young men and women that are developing. So if they come into parenthood earlier, it's a little bit more challenging, right? Because what I was a 20-year-old doing crazy stuff just like every other 20-year-old was doing, right? So I do see a level of discipline. I do see a level of respect. I do see a level of self-awareness, I would say, just about themselves and about their past and where they are today. That all come together. And sometimes it takes a little longer for some. Sometimes it takes a second child that then obviously reinforces, oh crap, I need to clean my act up because, now it really hit home, right? And so I think it's a beautiful thing. And I always tell people there's no right time. Everybody in this day and age is like, well, I got to make sure I have a certain amount of money in the bank account to do this. Man, look, kids cost money. That's the reality of it. But love is the most powerful thing you ever have. And if you're dead broke trying to chase a dream and you look in their eyes when you come home, they make everything okay. And not only do they make everything okay, they push you when you need a little bit more pushing, when nobody's looking and you need to go the extra mile to make sure you succeed, not only for them, but for your entire family, right? So I always believe that, man, family to me is my purpose. I have a professional purpose and a personal purpose. And to me, they go hand in hand. They motivate me equally the same, and they put things in perspective as well for me. So I always believe that the athlete, if they find that the right partner, I always encourage them to do it, man.
Yeah, well said. And I got to be honest, like there's something special about like seeing, I mean, obviously anybody that's into sports, they're a high level athlete. So when you see them win a competition, they obviously have a great feel of joy and satisfaction. But when you see the fighter in the cage with his kids after a fight, even after a loss or after a win, then that reaction with their kids, or when, I was down at the Super Bowl and you see these guys that play in the Super Bowl and then they're on the field holding their kids. There's just something about that. Even the military videos where the military serviceman comes home and surprises the kid. I mean, there's just something more magical about those moments when you see them. And
it humanizes us, right?
It does.
It humanizes us. It allows us to really, appreciate what we're looking at, right? So whether we're a fan of sports or whether we're a fan of our service members, it makes us really understand, the sacrifices that they've made, right? And that, what if that was me? Well, how would I react? Because now I can identify with that person, knowing that they're holding their loved ones, in the midst of whatever it is that we're watching them, right? Or whatever dynamic we're watching them in. And so I agree with you. I think it hits home for all of us.
Yeah, definitely. And we're talking there about discipline. What type of disciplinarian are you as a father? And is it different than the discipline style that you grew up with?
Yeah, it's definitely different than the style that I grew up with. I think we could all probably attest to that. But the one thing I try not to do is like they're daddy's girls, right? I mean, they have me wrapped around the finger, but I will say that I also try to really make sure I'm mindful of being being a good disciplinarian with them that helps them prepare for life. Because if I just gave them everything or coddled them with everything and just treated them like my little princesses, then they're gonna suffer down the road. And I don't know any different. Now, the one thing I don't do is I try my best to, because I'm a very loud person. I live a testosterone fueled life, and I come home to an estrogen filled house, right? So trying to balance that is really important, because I come from a locker room culture where even, it's like, come on, let's go. Like, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but the voice is always a little high. And so with my girls, I try to be mindful of, when I get really upset or I really want to make a point, I really try my best to start to talk lower. And it works on them actually better than it does when I yell. Sometimes if I slip and I raise my voice, it scares them. So I have to understand the difference between, the styles that I've been accustomed to, between the way I was raised, between my athletic career and then my professional career now, being around a very loud environment, to making sure that I communicate in a more a toned down voice with stern look, and as opposed to yelling, right? It's a challenge, but yet I love the challenge as well. I embrace it. I'm trying to be the best that I can. The other thing I try to do is really balance between the real world of the world that they live in and the world that I grew up with. We had cassette players, and when the CD Walkman came out, we're all like, yeah, and now these kids are faced in the midst of the quarantine, which we're dealing with now. They're FaceTiming with their cousins playing Roblox. It's a completely different world. And so sometimes I realize that's something I could take away, right? And so how do I discipline them? It's not the old yelling and you're go to your room, you're grounded. It's like, okay, no iPad. So you have to understand the different dynamics that you're dealing with compared to what we grew up with.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you, Audie. I'm a railroad mechanic. I've been working for the railroad for 20 years, and that whole mindset of being there is very, very different and very loud. So it's like when I come home, and then I had the three boys, and then to transition to disciplining my girl has been a difficult challenge for me at times. So I'm still learning new ways to communicate better with her and not come off so edgy and so rough when I try to deliver, my message or discipline her. So it's definitely a changing experience.
That's
What
awesome.
are Well, what are some of the top values that you're hoping to instill in your girls here?
Self-respect, first and foremost. I want to make sure that they understand that they have to love themselves. They have to value themselves. Love and respect for their family and their community. I think that's important to me. I think that I'm a big believer. We always huddle up as a family, and every morning before school we do a little huddle and a little break, and it's family over everything, right? And so to me, I value that, and I want them to understand that they need to do the same. And then just to be a kind and compassionate person. If they see someone that's in help, that's less fortunate, don't go with the crowd if you see everybody picking on someone else, and be someone that stands up against bullies, and be someone that stands up for someone that's less fortunate. And I mean, those are the three things that I try to really instill in my kids on a daily basis. And there's many more. You don't limit it to three, but those are the first three that come to mind. And then more importantly, I really try to be mindful of how I treat my wife in front of them, right? And because I don't have a little boy, so their only example of what they should expect and demand of a man is really through my actions. So
Yeah.
try to tell her how much I love her, how beautiful she is, give her a kiss every day, just little things I think that go a long way,
Yeah, great stuff. And what's next for you here, Audie? I mean, you've had so much success in your career building the business. Where do you see it going? What kind of goals you have or plans for the future?
This is another thing I try to teach them. At every level of success comes a new challenge, right? And it's like you didn't get here just to get here, and I don't think that we stop working and stop striving for success, and not just monetary success, but all types of success, including them. My success in them is really where I'm focused on. So if I could fast forward, and when they're 18 years old, and I know that I've done a good job, and I know that they're on the right path, then then I've won. So I have, the next decade to make sure that I accomplish that goal.
Yeah, very cool. All right, last thing I want to hit you with here, Audie. I love to ask all the dads that I get on the podcast, what type of advice do you have for the new dad or for that about-to-be father who's out there listening?
Embrace it. Embrace it. Get ready for a roller coaster ride that's so much fun. And if you don't like roller coasters, well, pick a ride that you like. But it's a lot of fun, a lot of twists and turns. I would tell you, be present in everything you do. Even if you have to work a lot, even if you have to travel a lot, there's no excuse, man. There's always a way to be present. And so if you could find that in your life, that balance in your life, and how to be present, whatever you do, even that brief time that you get will be a memory that's itched in their brain that they'll never forget. So enjoy the ride.
Yeah, very, very well said. I love the message. It's been an honor for me. I got to say, Audie Attar, you're a first-class father all the way, and thank you so much for giving me a few minutes of your time on First Class Fatherhood.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on.